The crystal walls of the Galactic Union Assembly Hall glowed with soft light. 3 suns shone through the transparent ceiling, casting rainbow patterns across the massive chamber. Representatives from 47 different star systems filled the curved rows of seats. Some floated in gravity fields, others rested in pools of liquid. A few stood on platforms adjusted for their specific atmospheric needs. Taeyang Kim sat in the human section, a small alcove near the back. His diplomatic robes felt heavy on his shoulders. Beside him, Jiwon Park scrolled through data on a tablet, her face tight with concentration. They had been called to this emergency session with only 6 hours' notice. Chancellor Dreth stood at the center platform. The insectoid's multiple eyes swept across the assembly. When he spoke, translators converted his clicking speech into dozens of languages. The Void Swarm has consumed 12 worlds, Dreth announced. 2 billion souls lost. Our projections show they will reach the core systems within 1 solar cycle. This is no longer a border conflict. This is a war for survival. Murmurs filled the chamber. Taeyang had read the reports. The Void Swarm was unlike any enemy the galaxy had faced, a hive mind of biological ships that ate entire planets. They absorbed technology, adapted to weapons, and grew stronger with each victory. Every member species must contribute their full military strength, Dreth continued. The Keltharian Empire will lead the main fleet. Other species will provide support based on their capabilities. One by one, species stood and pledged their forces. The crystalline Lithians promised 300 warships. The gaseous Arons offered their atmospheric fighters. The aquatic Thalassans would send their deep space carriers. Each announcement brought cheers and stamping of feet or whatever appendages each species possessed. Earth, Dreth called. What will humanity contribute? Taeyang stood. The chamber fell silent. He could feel thousands of eyes on him. Most were not friendly. Humanity had joined the Union only 50 years ago. They were seen as primitives, backwards, a charity case given membership out of pity. Earth offers its full military support, Taeyang said clearly. We will commit all available forces to this war. Laughter erupted. Not polite chuckles, but open mockery. A Lithian representative's crystal body chimed with amusement. An Aron's voice box whistled with what could only be derision. All available forces? One delegate called out. What is that, Ambassador? A dozen ships? Maybe some ground troops with projectile weapons? More laughter. Taeyang kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened. Jiwon touched his arm gently, a reminder to stay calm. We appreciate any contribution, Dreth said, his tone making it clear how little that contribution was expected to matter. Even symbolic support has value. Taeyang sat down. Around him, the laughter continued. But then he noticed something. In the Keltharian section, one figure sat perfectly still, General Vexnor, commander of the mightiest fleet in the galaxy. The reptilian's 3 eyes were fixed on Taeyang. His scaled face showed no expression, but something about his posture seemed wrong. Tense. Almost worried, the assembly continued. Battle plans were discussed. Supply lines debated. Command structure established. Humans were assigned to auxiliary support roles, which everyone understood meant staying out of the way of the real warriors. When the session finally ended, Taeyang made his way through the crowded halls. Delegates from other species pointedly ignored him or offered pitying looks. He had expected this. Earth's technology was centuries behind the galactic standard. Their ships were slower, their weapons weaker. On paper, humanity had nothing to offer. Ambassador Kim. Taeyang turned. General Vexnor stood in a side corridor, his massive form blocking the light. Up close, he was even more imposing. Nearly 3 meters tall, with cybernetic enhancements covering half his body. Scars marked his scaled skin. This was a soldier who had seen real combat. General, Taeyang replied, bowing slightly. A word in private, if you would. It was not quite a request. They walked to an observation deck. Through the transparent walls, the diplomatic world of Viridian Prime spread below them. Cities of gleaming towers, oceans of perfect blue, parks and gardens visible even from orbit. A peaceful world that had never known war. Vexnor was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice like stones grinding together. Tell your people to prepare, Ambassador. Tell them to ready every ship, every soldier, every weapon. We intend to, Taeyang said. But tell them also. Vexnor paused. His 3 eyes blinked in sequence. Tell them to show restraint, please. Taeyang studied the general carefully. You seem to know something about humans that the others don't. Vexnor turned to face him fully. 40 cycles ago, before your people made official contact, my exploratory fleet encountered your world. We cataloged it. We studied it from orbit. We watched your species for 3 months before moving on. I see, Tai Yang said. And what did you conclude? We designated Earth as Death World Class 12, Vexnor said quietly. Do you know what that means? Tai Yang shook his head. Most inhabited worlds are Class 1 or 2, mild gravity, stable atmosphere, predictable weather, safe. Earth? Vexnor's voice dropped lower. Your gravity would crush most species. Your atmosphere is toxic to half the races in that assembly. Your weather systems regularly destroy cities. Your tectonic plates shift constantly. Your oceans contain pressures that would implode our finest submarines. Your predators hunt in every environment, from your deepest waters to your highest mountains. We've adapted, Tai Yang said simply. Adapted, Vexnor repeated. Yes, that is what concerns me. Your species didn't just survive that world. You conquered it. You turned a Class 12 death world into a garden. You built cities where nothing should live. You swim in oceans that would kill me in seconds. You climb mountains for recreation that I would need full life support to approach. Is there a point to this, General? Vexnor's clawed hand gripped the railing. I read your military history, Ambassador, all of it. Every war, every battle, every conflict in your recorded past. Do you know what terrified me most? Tai Yang waited. You've never stopped fighting. In my species' history, we have had perhaps 6 major wars over 10,000 years. Your species has been in continuous conflict for your entire existence. You have created thousands of ways to kill each other. You have weapons designed for every environment on your planet. You have strategies for every possible scenario, and you teach your children that dying for a cause is noble. We've had to, Tai Yang said. Our world taught us that survival requires strength. I know, Vexnor said. That's what frightens me. Ambassador Kim, when this war begins, the other species will expect you to fail. They will give you the most dangerous assignments, expecting you to break and retreat. They do not understand what I understand. And what do you understand, General? Vexnor turned back to the view. That you come from a world that tried to kill you every single day. That you evolved in an environment more hostile than anything the Void Swarm can create. That you learned to fight not as a profession, but as a way of life. And that when you are finally unleashed upon an enemy... He paused. I know enough to be afraid, Ambassador. I know enough to hope the galaxy survives your help. The General walked away, his heavy footsteps echoing in the corridor. Tai Yang stood alone, looking down at the peaceful world below. He thought about Earth, about its storms and earthquakes, about its history of warfare, about humanity's long, brutal climb from the caves to the stars. Jiwan found him there 10 minutes later. What did he want? She asked. Tai Yang watched Vexnor's ship depart from a docking bay far below. I think he wanted to warn us, or maybe warn them about us. I'm not entirely sure which. Should I be concerned? Jiwan asked. Tai Yang turned to her. Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them to prepare every ship and every soldier. Tell them this is not going to be a minor engagement. And tell them... He paused, remembering Vexnor's words. Tell them the galaxy is about to learn what a death world produces. Jiwan nodded and left. Tai Yang remained on the observation deck, watching the peaceful world turn below. Somewhere out there, beyond the reaches of explored space, the Void Swarm was coming, and humanity, dismissed and mocked, would stand in its path. He wondered if the galaxy was ready for what came next. He suspected it was not. The conference room was deep inside the Keltharian diplomatic wing. Security fields hummed at the entrance. The walls were thick metal designed to block all signals. When General Vexnor called an emergency meeting, people came without questions. Admiral Subin Lee arrived first. She commanded Earth's first expeditionary fleet, though fleet was a generous term for 12 destroyers and 3 carriers. She had fought in the Mars Rebellion and survived the Titan Wars. Her face carried the lines of someone who had seen too much combat. Commander Hyunwoo Choi came next. He led Earth's Special Operations Forces. Cold eyes, efficient movements. He had run operations on 15 different worlds, though most of those missions were still classified. Da-eun Song was last to enter. She looked uncomfortable in her formal uniform. As Earth's chief xenobiologist, she preferred laboratories to military briefings. Her specialty was the Void Swarm, though she had never seen one in person. Other commanders filled the room. Lithians, Thalassans, Arans, and a dozen other species, all senior officers, all confused about why they had been summoned. Vexnor sealed the doors. Security protocols engaged with a series of clicks. The holographic display at the center of the room flickered to life, showing a slowly rotating planet, blue oceans, green continents, white clouds. Beautiful. Earth, Vexnor said simply. The human representatives exchanged glances. The alien commanders looked bored. They had seen Earth in the database, a primitive world with a young species. 40 cycles ago, Vexnor continued, my exploratory fleet encountered this world. We were mapping systems in what you now call the local group. We detected technological signatures and moved in to investigate. He touched a control. The image changed to show technical readouts. Gravity measurements, atmospheric composition, seismic activity, temperature ranges. One by one, the numbers appeared. A Lithian commander spoke up. Those readings are incorrect. That gravity would be crushing. That oxygen level is toxic. Those temperature swings are correct, Vexnor interrupted. Every reading is accurate. We verified them multiple times. We designated Earth as Death World Class 12. Silence. Most inhabited worlds were Class 1 or 2. A Class 12 world should be uninhabitable. Nothing complex should survive there, let alone develop intelligence. You're telling us the humans evolved on a Class 12 Death World? A Thalasan asked. I am telling you they conquered it, Vexnor said. He pulled up more images. Human cities with no protective domes. Humans swimming in crushing ocean depths. Humans climbing mountains where the air was too thin to breathe. Humans running through deserts in midday heat. They do this for recreation, Vexnor stated. They call it extreme sports. They challenge their own world for fun. Admiral Lee watched the alien commanders react. She had grown up on Earth. She had never thought of it as particularly deadly. It was just home. But seeing it through their eyes, she began to understand. Vexnor changed the display again. But the environment is not what concerns me most. It is their history. Battle scenes appeared. Ancient warriors with swords. Medieval knights in armor. Soldiers with rifles in trenches. Tanks rolling across fields. Aircraft dropping bombs. Missiles launching. Nuclear explosions. This is one species' military history, Vexnor said. Over 10,000 years of continuous warfare. They have fought each other in every environment on their planet. They have created tens of thousands of different weapons. They have developed strategies for every possible scenario. A young Aran officer spoke up. But General, all species have some conflict in their past. We fought the Unification Wars 4,000 years ago. One war, Vexnor said. 4,000 years ago. In the last 3,500 years of human history, they have had fewer than 300 years of total peace. And even during peacetime, smaller conflicts never stopped. The commanders shifted uncomfortably. This was difficult to process. Most species fought perhaps once every few generations. War was rare, unusual, something to be avoided. There is more, Vexnor said. He pulled up psychological profiles. Humans practice something called persistence hunting. They chase prey for days until it collapses from exhaustion. Their bodies can ignore pain signals and continue functioning past any rational limit. They can sustain focused aggression for extended periods, and they have a pack-bonding instinct that makes them protect their companions with suicidal intensity. Da-Un spoke for the first time. General Vexnor, I appreciate the biology lesson about my own species, but why are you telling us this? Vexnor's three eyes fixed on her. Because, Doctor, the Council is about to give your species a war, and I want these commanders to understand what that means. He brought up more footage. Human soldiers training, running until they vomited, then running more, carrying heavy weights across difficult terrain, fighting hand-to-hand in brutal exercises, diving into freezing water, crawling through mud and barbed wire. Most species flee from superior force, Vexnor explained. It is logical, evolutionary. Survival requires knowing when to retreat. Humans, he paused. Humans invented a word for refusing to retreat even when facing certain death. They call it courage, and they teach it to their children as a virtue. They train their young to run toward danger, not away from it. They celebrate those who sacrifice themselves for others. They tell stories of last stands and hopeless battles as if these are good things. Their greatest heroes are often those who died fighting impossible odds. The room was completely silent now. Even the humans were uncomfortable hearing their culture described this way. A Thalassan admiral stood abruptly. General Vexnor, with respect, you are describing a species of monsters. Why did you not report this when you first encountered them? Why was Earth allowed into the Union? Vexnor turned to face the Admiral fully. Because when we made first contact, they extended friendship. They shared their technology freely. They sought peaceful relations. They had the capability to attack us. My fleet was vulnerable, but they chose diplomacy instead. He paused. And because I was terrified of what would happen if we made them our enemy, a species that fights like they do with the technology we could give them, better to have them as allies. Commander Choi leaned back in his chair. His face showed no emotion, but his eyes were calculating. He was beginning to understand why this meeting had been called. Admiral Lee spoke carefully. General Vexnor, why are you telling us this now? Vexnor looked at each person in the room. Because the Council will give you assignments in this war. They will place you where casualties are expected to be highest. They will give you impossible objectives. They believe you will fail, and they have calculated that your failure is acceptable. But I have studied your history. I have read your strategies. I have watched your training. And I know something the Council does not know. What? Admiral Lee asked. You will not fail, Vexnor said quietly. You will take your impossible assignments and you will complete them. You will suffer casualties that would break any other species. And you will keep fighting. You will face odds that any rational being would flee from, and you will advance anyway. He turned to the alien commanders. I want you to be prepared. Because when this war is over, when the Void Swarm is defeated, the galaxy is going to ask itself a question. What have we unleashed? His three eyes moved back to the humans. And I want you to understand that we know what you are. We know what your world made you. So please, when you win this war, and you will win, please remember that we were your allies. Remember that we gave you friendship when we could have given you fear. The meeting ended in heavy silence. Commanders filed out, most looking disturbed. The aliens talked in quiet clusters, casting nervous glances at the human representatives. Daun waited until the room was nearly empty, then approached Vexnor. General, she said quietly, you're afraid of us, but you still argued for our inclusion in the Union. Why? Vexnor looked down at her. She was small compared to his massive frame, but she met his gaze without flinching. Because, Dr. Song, I have seen what happens when your species believes something is right. I have studied your history. When humans decide a cause is just, they are unstoppable. You will endure any hardship, pay any price, make any sacrifice. He paused. Your capacity for violence terrifies me, but your capacity for loyalty, for sacrifice, for protecting those who cannot protect themselves, he shook his massive head. That gives me hope. The galaxy needs that. We have grown soft, comfortable. We have forgotten that some things are worth fighting for. So yes, I am afraid of you, but I am more afraid of what would happen if you were not here. The Void Swarm cannot be reasoned with. It cannot be negotiated with. It must be fought. And fighting is what your world taught you to do. Daun was quiet for a moment. You think we'll win? I think you cannot lose, Vexnor said. Because you come from a world that tried to kill you every day and you refused to die. The Void Swarm is just another predator, and humans have been facing predators since before you learned to make fire. He moved toward the door, then stopped. Just, please prove me right, Doctor. Please show us that a species bred in violence can still choose to be good. That strength can be used to protect, not just to destroy. Dawn watched him leave. Then she looked at Admiral Lee and Commander Choi. The Corvin system hung at the junction of three major trade routes. 2,000 ships from 47 species filled the space around the central star. It was the greatest military force in galactic history. Energy shields glowed. Weapon arrays hummed with power. Millions of soldiers waited in their ships. Earth's contribution looked pitiful by comparison. 12 destroyers, 3 carriers, 40,000 troops. They were positioned on the front line, where casualties were expected to be highest. The other species thought this was appropriate. Let the primitives take the first hits. Captain Min Seo Yoon stood on the bridge of the destroyer ESS Indomitable. Her ship was old by galactic standards, slow, poorly armed, but it was hers, and she had kept it running through 3 tours of duty. Contact in 30 minutes, her tactical officer reported. Sensors picking up massive biological signatures at the edge of the system. Min Seo nodded. She had seen the intelligence reports. The Void Swarm ships were alive. Massive creatures that had been bred for war over billions of years. They ate metal, absorbed energy, and adapted to any weapon used against them. On the orbital platform below, Sergeant Jae-sung Kang checked his rifle for the third time. Around him, the soldiers of the 7th Drop Battalion prepared for combat. They were Marines. They had trained for boarding actions and ground combat. Most expected to die in this battle. Sergeant, one of his soldiers, called. "You think we'll really make a difference?" Jae-sung looked at the young man, barely 20 years old, fresh from training. "We'll do our job," he said simply. "That's all that matters." In the fighter bay of the carrier ESS Defiance, Lieutenant Haewon Nam climbed into his cockpit. His squadron, 12 fighters, was ready. They had never fought aliens before. Earth's fighters were designed for combat against other human ships. No one knew if their weapons would even work against the swarm. "All wings report ready," his wingman said over the comm. "Then let's show them what Earth pilots can do," Haewon replied. On the command ship, Observer Kethis watched the human positions with academic interest. The Lithian crystalline being had been assigned to document human combat capabilities. He was skeptical. He had read General Vexnor's report, but it seemed exaggerated. How dangerous could primitives really be? The Void Swarm arrived early. Billions of organic ships poured into the system like a living tide. They were grotesque, biological nightmares shaped by evolution into perfect killing machines. Some were small and fast. Others were massive, planet-sized monstrosities. The battle began according to standard galactic doctrine. Long-range energy weapons fired. Ships maneuvered carefully. When losses reached 20%, units would pull back to regroup. It was civilized warfare, calculated, logical. The human contingent received its orders. Hold the right flank for 1 hour while the main fleet repositioned. It was a suicide mission. Everyone knew it. The humans were expected to retreat after losing 30% of their forces. Min Seo read the orders and smiled grimly. "All ships, this is Indomitable. We have our mission. We hold this line, no matter what." The Void Swarm hit the human position like a hammer. Hundreds of biological ships swarmed forward. The standard response would be to fall back, maintain distance, use long-range weapons. Min Seo gave different orders. "All ahead full. Ram speed. Take us into them." Her tactical officer stared. "Ma'am, that's insane, yes. Execute the order." The Indomitable accelerated directly into the swarm. Other human ships followed. They weren't retreating. They weren't maintaining distance. They were attacking, charging straight into the enemy like ancient cavalry. Observer Kethis watched in shock. They're committing suicide. Why are they not retreating? A human liaison officer stood beside him, because they were told to hold the line. So they're holding it. The human destroyers plunged into the swarm, firing at point-blank range. Their shields collapsed. Their armor cracked, but they kept firing. The swarm had evolved to chase fleeing prey. It had no response to prey that attacked. On the orbital platform, alarms screamed. The Void Swarm had breached the outer hull. Biological horrors poured through the corridors. The order came to evacuate. Standard procedure. Fall back to the ships. Sergeant Jae-sung acknowledged the order. Then he gave his own. Fix bayonets. Observer Kethis heard this over the command channel. "What is a bayonet?" he asked. The liaison officer looked grim. "It's a knife. You attach it to your rifle. For close combat. But they have advanced weapons. Why would they?" Kethis pulled up footage from the platform. His crystalline body stopped vibrating in shock. The human soldiers weren't retreating. They were advancing into the swarm, fighting the biological horrors at arm's length, stabbing, shooting, dying. Some were overwhelmed, pulled down by multiple creatures. They kept fighting even as they fell. "This is madness," Kethis whispered. "No," the liaison officer said quietly. "This is humanity. They won't leave anyone behind. They won't stop fighting until they physically can't fight anymore." In space, Lieutenant Haewon's squadron faced impossible odds. 20 swarm fighters for every human ship. Standard doctrine, break formation, retreat, preserve forces. Haewon gave different orders. "Form up tight. Attack pattern Delta, we're going straight through them." "Sir," his wingman protested, "we'll be destroyed." "Yes," Haewon agreed, "but we'll take enough of them with us to save the carrier." "That's our job. Now form up." The squadron dove into the swarm. Their fighters were faster than the biological ships, more maneuverable, but there were so many enemies. One by one, human fighters died in bursts of flame. They took dozens of swarm ships with them. Haywan's fighter was hit. His shields failed. His right engine exploded. He kept flying, kept shooting. When his weapons ran out of ammunition, he rammed his dying fighter into a swarm cruiser. It wasn't strategy. It was just what you did when you had no other option. In the command center, the galactic commanders watched with growing horror. Human casualties had passed 50%. Then 60. Then 70. By all military logic, they should have broken hours ago. Should have retreated. Should have abandoned the position. They didn't. They held. More than held, they were advancing. Pushing forward into the enemy despite their losses. Chancellor Dreth turned to General Vexnor. "You tried to warn us," he said quietly. "I did," Vexnor replied. "But words cannot prepare you for this. They don't fight like us. We fight to win with minimal losses. They fight to win at any cost. And they don't have a breaking point. Or if they do, we haven't found it yet." Observer Kethis was shaking. "This is horrific. They're throwing away lives." Admiral Lee's voice came over the command channel. "We're not throwing away anything. We're spending them. There's a difference. Every soldier who dies here is buying time for someone else to live. That's not waste. That's the price we've always paid." The human forces were down to 30% strength. Their ships were wrecks held together by emergency force fields. Their soldiers were exhausted, wounded, running out of ammunition. The main fleet needed 30 more minutes to complete its repositioning. The Void Swarm launched a final massive assault. It should have annihilated what remained of Earth's forces. Instead, something impossible happened. The swarm hesitated. These biological ships evolved for billions of years to be perfect predators, encountered something their instincts couldn't process. Prey that wouldn't stop attacking. Prey that chased them. Prey that fought with knives when guns were empty. Prey that rammed their dying ships into swarm vessels when they had no other weapons. The hive mind, ancient and powerful, felt something it had never experienced. Fear. Not rational thought. The swarm didn't think like that. But instinct. The deep evolutionary knowledge that this prey was wrong, dangerous, something to be avoided. The swarm's formation wavered, then broke. For the first time in this war, the Void Swarm retreated. The combined fleet exploited the gap immediately. Fresh ships poured into the breach. The tide of battle turned. Within 2 hours, the swarm was driven from the system. The cost was terrible. 8,200 human soldiers dead. 11 ships destroyed. 3 crippled beyond repair. 73% casualties. By galactic standards, it was catastrophic. By human standards, it was a victory. They had held the line for 31 minutes. 1 minute longer than required. Captain Minseo stood on the bridge of the barely functional Indomitable. Half her crew was dead. Her ship would never fly again. But they had done their job. A message came from Chancellor Dreth. He wanted an explanation for human tactics. Why had they fought that way? Why had they refused to retreat? Minso looked at her exhausted, wounded crew. At the memorial wall showing those they had lost, she thought about how to explain 10,000 years of human warfare to species that had rarely known it. Finally, she responded, "We were told to hold the line. We held it, that's what we do." She didn't mention the rest. Didn't explain that humans had been holding lines since their ancestors first stood upright on the African plains. That retreat wasn't in their vocabulary when something important was at stake. That every human child grew up hearing stories of last stands, of impossible victories, of people who refused to break no matter the odds. The Chancellor was silent for a long moment. Then, "The Council is reassessing Earth's role in this war." Minseo smiled tiredly. "Good, because we're just getting started." 3 months had passed since the Battle of Corvin. The war had changed. Humanity was no longer in supporting roles. They were leading the counteroffensive. But with this new prominence came questions. Uncomfortable questions about human methods and what they meant. The galactic species were winning. But they were also terrified of their saviors. Colonel Bora Shin stood on the bridge of the assault carrier approaching New Meridian. The colony world had been lost to the Void Swarm 6 months ago. Every species had declared it unrecoverable. The swarm had transformed the entire planet into a living nightmare. The atmosphere was toxic. The temperature swung wildly. Organic growths covered every surface. Humans volunteered to take it back. "Landing Zone Alpha is hot," her tactical officer reported. "Swarm organisms covering 80% of the surface. Atmospheric toxins at lethal levels for most species. Boran nodded. Deploy hazard teams. Full environmental suits. Tell them it's just another day at the office. The officer smiled slightly. Humans had trained for this. Not because they expected to fight on alien death worlds, but because Earth had plenty of environments just as hostile. Volcanic regions, deep ocean trenches, polar extremes, Antarctic bases, underwater research stations. Compared to some places on Earth, New Meridian was merely uncomfortable. In orbit, observer Kethis monitored the mission. He had been assigned to continue documenting human operations. After Corvin, the Council wanted to understand these strange warriors better. What he was seeing now disturbed him more than the battle had. The human soldiers deployed into the nightmare landscape. They moved through toxic air and crushing heat with casual efficiency. They navigated terrain that would kill most species within minutes. And they were singing. Why are they singing? Kethis asked the human liaison. Military tradition, the liaison explained. Cadences. Work songs. Keeps morale up. Reminds them they're not alone. But they're in a hell world, Kethis said. They grew up on one, the liaison replied. This is just another Tuesday for them. On the surface, a squad leader addressed her troops. Remember your training. Our ancestors fought in jungles that tried to eat them, deserts that cooked them alive, winters that froze them solid. This, she gestured at the alien landscape. This is nothing special. Now let's go get our planet back. The mission took 3 weeks, 40% casualties. Humans lost more soldiers reclaiming New Meridian than most species lost in entire wars. But they succeeded. The planet was liberated. The swarm was driven off. The Council watched this victory and felt fear. Not gratitude. Fear. Dr. Young Jae Han made his breakthrough 2 weeks later. The xenopsychologist had been studying the void swarm's hive mind. He discovered it had collective memory. It learned from every encounter. It remembered every defeat. He proposed a radical strategy, psychological warfare against a hive mind. The presentation to the War Council was met with confusion. A Lithian commander spoke up. How do you intimidate a species that doesn't fear death? That has no individual consciousness? Young Jae pulled up his data. We don't scare them of death. We teach them to fear humanity specifically. We make every encounter with human forces so traumatic, so costly, that the hive mind develops an instinctive aversion to us. How? Another commander asked. We let some of them survive, Young Jae explained. We make sure they carry memories back to the hive mind. Memories of human ferocity, human persistence, human refusal to stop. The hive learns from these memories. It will begin to recognize human signatures, and it will hesitate. The strategy was approved. Human forces began implementing it. They would corner swarm units, destroy most of them, but let some escape. Those survivors carried traumatic memories back to the collective consciousness. It worked. The swarm began showing hesitation when encountering human forces. Not fear exactly. The hive mind didn't think that way. But something like it. An instinctive knowledge that humans were dangerous prey. The galactic observers were disturbed. They watched humans weaponize fear itself. They saw a species that understood war so deeply they could use psychology as effectively as any weapon. An emergency council session was called. Ambassador Taeyang Kim faced the assembly. The mood was different now. 3 months ago they had mocked Earth. Now they feared it. A Thalassen delegate stood. Ambassador Kim, we must address concerns about human conduct in this war. Your soldiers accept casualties that horrify us. You study the enemy with cold efficiency. You speak of acceptable losses as if life is just another resource. Another delegate added, you are winning this war for us. But we are beginning to wonder at what cost. Not just to you, but to us. What kind of allies have we become dependent upon? Taeyang listened to the complaints, the accusations, the fear. Then he stood. You are right, he said quietly. We do accept casualties that seem incomprehensible to you. We do study war with an efficiency born from thousands of years of practice. We do speak of losses in ways that sound cold. He paused. But understand this. Every human who has died in this war volunteered. They knew the risks. They accepted them. Not because we're monsters, but because we understand something you don't. What? Chancellor Dreth asked. That sometimes survival requires sacrifice. That protecting those who cannot protect themselves means paying a terrible price. Our world taught us this lesson over millions of years. We didn't get to choose easier circumstances. We adapted to the world we had. Taeyang looked around the chamber. You call us brutal. We call it necessary. You say we're too efficient at warfare. We say we learned from harsh experience. You fear our methods. We fear what happens if we don't use them. And here is the truth none of you want to hear. We would rather it be us. We would rather we pay the price, suffer the losses, carry the burden. Because we know how. Because our world taught us how. We don't want you to have to learn what we learned. Silence filled the chamber. Then General Vexnor stood. I warned you what humans were, Vexnor said. I told you they were terrifying. But I also told you they were our best hope. Nothing has changed except your understanding. He displayed tactical data. Since humans took the lead, we have reclaimed 17 systems. Overall casualties are down 34% despite more aggressive operations. The swarm is in retreat for the first time in this war. Vexnor turned to face the council. You are afraid because you are seeing warfare conducted by a species that evolved on a world that taught them war is sometimes necessary. By a species that learned to accept terrible costs because the alternative was extinction. You asked them to save the galaxy. They are doing it. If you cannot stomach their methods, then perhaps you should have saved yourselves. Before the council could respond, alarms sounded, a priority alert. The Void Swarm had launched a massive counteroffensive. The target, Viridian Prime itself, home of the Galactic Council, the heart of their civilization. The defensive fleet was overwhelmed. Projections showed the planet would fall within 6 hours. Billions would die. Admiral Su-Bin Lee was closest with the human fleet. Her forces had been conducting operations 2 systems away. She could reach Viridian Prime in 4 hours, but it would mean another desperate battle, more terrible losses. Chancellor Dreth opened a channel to her ship. Admiral Lee, we request your assistance. But I must inform you that the tactical situation is dire. We would not blame you if... We're already en route, Lee interrupted. ETA 4 hours. We'll need to use Earth tactics. Full commitment. No retreats. High casualties. I understand, Dreth said quietly. And Admiral? Thank you. Lee smiled grimly. Don't thank us yet, Chancellor. You're about to see why our world tried so hard to kill us, and why we learned to hit back. She closed the channel and addressed her crew. All ships battle stations. This is going to be bad. Probably the worst fight we've seen. But those people down there gave us a chance when they didn't have to. They welcomed us into their union. They gave us friendship. Now they need us. So we're going to do what humans do. We're going to stand between them and the darkness. We're going to pay whatever price is necessary. And we're going to win. Throughout the fleet, soldiers checked their weapons. Pilots climbed into their fighters. Marines gathered in drop pods. They knew the odds. They knew the cost. They went anyway. In the troop bay of the flagship, someone started singing an old military song. Others joined in. The words were simple, the melody ancient, but it spoke of courage and sacrifice and standing firm when everything fell apart. Observer Kethis, still embedded with the fleet, recorded this moment. His report to the council was brief. They are going to win. I do not know how I know this, but I know, and I am beginning to understand why General Vexnor was afraid. Not because they are monsters, but because they are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, a species that has learned to love each other more than they fear death. The human fleet accelerated toward Viridian Prime. Behind them, the rest of the galactic forces scrambled to follow, but everyone knew the truth. By the time reinforcements arrived, the battle would be decided. One way or another, the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you gave humans something worth dying for. 6 months after the Battle of Viridian Prime, the galaxy was at peace. The Void Swarm had been driven back to the galactic rim. Small skirmishes continued, but the war was effectively over. Humanity had saved the galaxy, but the victory came with questions that no one quite knew how to answer. A memorial service was held on Earth for the 127,000 humans who had died in the war. Representatives from every galactic species attended. It was the first time most aliens had visited the Death World. They were terrified from the moment they arrived. Observer Kethis stood in an open field in Korea, feeling Earth's gravity crush down on his crystalline form. The air burned his respiratory system even with mechanical assistance. Weather systems that could kill him moved across the horizon. Around him, human children played and laughed, completely unaware of the danger. Mi Ryan, A young human diplomat served as his guide. She watched his discomfort with patient understanding. "You get used to it," she said gently. "How?" Kethis asked. "This pressure, this atmosphere, this constant danger. How do you live with it?" Miri smiled sadly. "We notice it. We just learned to live with it. Our world taught us that threats don't go away because you're afraid of them. You either adapt or you die. We chose to adapt." The memorial ceremony began. Thousands gathered. Human families who had lost loved ones, alien diplomats paying respects, soldiers in dress uniforms. The names of the dead were read aloud. It took 3 hours. Ambassador Taeyang Kim spoke. His voice carried across the field. "We did not fight your war because we are warriors. We fought because it was right. Because when someone needs help, you help. That is what humanity learned from our world. Not just how to survive, but why survival matters. These 127,000 people chose to stand between you and darkness. They chose to pay the price that you should never have to pay, not because they were better than you, but because they knew how, and they could not stand by while others suffered." After the ceremony, many lingered. Sulgi Park, a veteran of the war, sat in a quiet garden with General Vexnor. Both carried visible and invisible scars from the conflict. Sulgi's left arm was cybernetic now. Vexnor's third eye was clouded, damaged beyond repair. "Do the nightmares ever stop?" Vexnor asked quietly. Sulgi was silent for a long time. She watched leaves fall from a nearby tree. Finally she answered, "No, but you learn to carry them. Every human soldier knows the war does not end when the fighting stops. It stays with you." "We accept that. How?" Vexnor asked. "How do you accept such pain?" Sulgi looked at him. "Because the alternative is worse. If we don't carry the weight, who will? We learned a long time ago that someone has to stand in the darkness so others can live in the light. We decided that someone should be us." Vexnor understood then. It was not that humans did not feel fear or pain. They felt it as deeply as any species. They had simply learned to act despite it, to carry the burden so others would not have to. Meanwhile, the Galactic Council convened to determine Earth's new role. The debate was heated. Some species argued that humanity should be restricted, too dangerous to be given free rein. Others wanted them as a permanent military force. Both options treated humans as tools or threats rather than equals. General Vexnor requested permission to speak. When it was granted, he stood before the full assembly. His voice carried the weight of his experiences. "I warned you about the humans," he began. "I told you they were the most dangerous species we would ever encounter. I was right. But I was also wrong. They are not dangerous because they are violent. They are dangerous because they care." He paused, letting his words sink in. Every species in this chamber lost worlds to the swarm. Every species waited for someone else to save them. Only one species volunteered to pay the price in blood that none of us were willing to pay. The youngest species, the newest members, the ones we all underestimated. They taught us something important, not how to fight, though they are masters of that. They taught us that civilization is not about avoiding violence. It is about being willing to stand between the innocent and those who would harm them, no matter the cost. We should not restrict them. We should learn from them. And we should be grateful that when the galaxy needed heroes, it was the Death Worlders who answered the call. The Council voted. Earth would not be restricted. Instead, a new institution would be created. The Academy of Survival Sciences, jointly operated by Earth and the Galactic Union. Here, humans would teach other species. Not just military tactics, but the philosophy that underlies human resilience. 6 months later, the Academy opened. The first class of students represented 40 different species. They struggled with the physical challenges. Earth's gravity was brutal for most of them. The training pushed them beyond anything they had experienced. But they tried. They persevered. Their instructors were human veterans who had learned to be gentle teachers to species who had not grown up on a death world. They pushed the students, but never broke them. They taught them to find strength they did not know they had. Mai Ray now worked at the Academy as a cultural liaison. She helped alien students understand human thinking. One day, a group of students asked her the question they all wondered about. "What is the most important lesson from Earth?" A young Lithian asked. Mireille thought carefully. "That adversity does not have to make you cruel. Our world tried to kill us every day. It made us tough, yes. It made us adaptable. It taught us to endure. But it also taught us something else." "What?" another student asked. that we are all in this together. On Earth, no human survives alone. We learn to help each other, to sacrifice for each other, to carry each other when one of us falls. Our world was hostile, so we learned to be kind to each other. It tried to divide us, so we learned to unite. It taught us that strength is not about dominating others. Strength is about protecting them. She smiled at the students. That is the real lesson of the death world. Not that it made us hard, but that it made us care about each other too much to give up. At the Academy's opening ceremony, Ambassador Kim delivered an address to the gathered students and faculty. You are here because your leaders want you to be more like humans. They want you to be tough, to be warriors, to be willing to sacrifice. But that is not the lesson we are going to teach you. The students looked confused. Kim continued, We are going to teach you why we fight. We will teach you that courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite fear. That sacrifice is not about death. It is about making your life mean something. That strength is not about being hard. It is about being kind even when the world is cruel. Earth tried to kill us for millions of years, Kim said. It made us dangerous. But it also made us determined that no one else should suffer what we suffered. That is why we fought for you. Not because we are warriors, but because we are caretakers. We learned to fight so that others would not have to. General Vexnor stood among the alien students. He was the only non-human to complete the first round of training. The experience had been brutal, but he had insisted. If he was going to advocate for human methods, he needed to understand them fully. He spoke now, his voice carrying across the assembly. I feared humans once. I feared their capacity for violence. But I learned something during this war. A species that will die for strangers, that will sacrifice everything to protect those they just met, that will carry any burden to ensure others are safe. That is not a species to fear. That is a species to aspire to be. Observer Kethis completed his final report on humanity. It would become required reading at the Academy. He wrote, They call Earth a death world. But I have realized something. Every world is a death world to someone. What makes Earth special is not how deadly it is. It is that Earth created a species who learned to respond to death with life, to respond to cruelty with kindness, to respond to fear with courage. They are not the galaxy's warriors. They are the galaxy's proof that adversity does not have to make you a monster. It can make you a hero. Months passed. The Academy thrived. Alien students learned. Not all of them succeeded. Some could not adapt to the rigorous training. But those who did graduate carried something new with them. Not just skills, but understanding. A knowledge of why those skills mattered. Sulgi met regularly with other veterans, both human and alien. They had formed a support group. Combat created bonds that transcended species. They understood each other in ways their governments never would. They were healing together, slowly, painfully, but together. Mireille walked through the Academy grounds one evening. She watched alien students helping each other through challenges that would have broken them individually. They were learning. Not just how to fight, but why to fight. Not just how to endure, but why endurance matters. On Earth, life continued. Children played in the deadly gravity. They breathed the toxic air. They lived on the world that had tried to kill their ancestors. They laughed and grew and dreamed. They did not know yet that they were from a death world. To them, it was just home. The galaxy had changed. They had called for war, expecting warriors. They got something more dangerous and more wonderful, a species who had learned that the only thing worth fighting for is each other. Earth had not sent conquerors. They had sent protectors,